And he sat down and wrote something. And the Chinese guy just bowed his head and slunked away.
Wow.
He wrote something in Confucian morality, like a real man doesn't behave like you're
right.
doing. Hello everyone, this is Mark Peters with the Frog Outside the Well Research Center, and today here's Chad again.
Back again.
It's good to see you. You know, we did that gig about the Miracle Battalion.
Yes.
I showed you how we did some shooting out there and we're getting it ready to go. In the process of doing that, we interviewed him in his home and then out on the site.
Okay.
And when you first look at him, he looks a little bit countrified.
Yeah.
He's a farmer.
Yeah.
But as we were talking to him, there was something about him that was just, I kept trying to find the right word. And the English word I came up with was refined.
Okay.
He's a country guy, but there's something about him that was very refined or cultured. For example, when he would talk to us and he'd explain something, he did the writing the hancha in your hand thing,
okay.
which means he knows the hancha. So he's a farmer, but he's an educated farmer and educated in the classics. So that tells you one thing right there. So as he's talking to us, he told us about when the Chinese came in, and they came in thinking they were rescuers of the people. So they weren't coming and killing people.
Interesting.
They were the liberators.
Okay.
So the farmers that were there, they were friendly to them.
Okay.
And they didn't know quite how to react to it because they left when the Chinese came in, but out of desperation, they had nowhere to go, and they went back to see what they had. And the Chinese were good to them. And he hung out with one of the Chinese soldiers, apparently, because he was telling us what the Chinese hand grenade looks like.
Wow.
It's a baton hand grenade. It's got a wooden stick.
Yeah, like the German ones?
Yeah, like the Germans have. Yeah. And you can, and he was saying you could really fling it. He said it was heavy. You could tell that he had handled it. He had talked with these Chinese soldiers enough to,
and they trusted him enough to let him handle a hand grenade.
Yeah, that he's not going to blow them up.
Yeah.
So he's a 14-year-old boy. And then he told us of an incident. This is what I want to tell you about today. He told us of an incident. He says some of the Chinese soldiers were decent and good-hearted, but there were bad guys among them, which you'd expect. Some guys went out of their way to rape ladies.
Gosh.
I've seen something like this before. We were fleeing, but couldn't get far away, couldn't really evacuate. And there was a chance, there was a place in this other village where there was a Chinese guy that took off after a young girl. The girl jumped across a stream and ran up a hill and got away from him. So the Chinese guy turned to a ajima, an older woman who was carrying water on her head. He went after her. Here's the clincher. He said, my father went after him. Now, if this were an ordinary situation, not a Korean situation, maybe even a modern Korea, but you could see where it could turn into a fight. It could turn into violence. Yeah. It wasn't that. His father went up to him and said, hey, come here. He can't speak Chinese, but he can write Chinese, classical Chinese. He sat him down and wrote something to him. And he had said that my father knew Mencius and Confucius. And he sat down and wrote something. And the Chinese guy just bowed his head and slunked away.
Wow.
He wrote something in Confucian morality, like a real man doesn't behave like you're doing.
Right.
You know, who do you think you are behaving like this in Chinese?
Right.
And the guy gave up and went back.
Wow.
So I was thinking about this. The time when he said it, I thought, well, that's an interesting story. But I've been thinking about it afterward. I'm thinking about this man. He had said that his father was well-educated. And he implied that he himself was not, and yet he could write the Chinese in his hand. So I thought, well, what's going on here? And, you know, lately I've been doing this shtick about the difference between Koreans and Japanese. Is the Koreans are the sunbi. They're the scholar. They're the Confucian gentleman. And the Japanese would swing the sword. And in this situation, what would a Japanese have done? You know, it would have been a fight or something. But here, this father uses moral persuasion to get this Chinese guy to quit chasing after the Korean women. And then he says at the end of it, he says, and I watched this. He's a 14-year-old boy. I watched this and I was so impressed. He was so impressed, Mr. Chung was so impressed with this that he repeated this when he was talking to the other old man out at the site. Well, at the time, it just was a story, but I've been thinking about it. It's just been settling in my head. This is the hallmark of the Korean sunbi.
Yeah.
This says something about not just this incident, but this says something about the Korean culture. this civil, cultured, refined
Right.
kind of culture. And you look at him in the video, and he's a country farmer, and you think, well, and his language is really hard to understand. But there's something about him that's truly 세련하다, cultured, refined. The 문명하다, he's cultured.
Wow.
So that was my impression.
Wow.
I just wanted to share that with
That's
you.
a crazy story, and it does. I mean, I'm sure people who would say, like, well, the answer in that situation is violence, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's not always violence, and maybe it would have turned out really poorly
in another situation. Yeah.
If it was violent.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah, he could have run up there and said, "Hey, you rotten dog! What are you doing with our Korean women?" And it could have been a real ugly fight, and the father could have been killed in the fight.
Exactly.
But the father had the guts to
Yeah.
go out there and he said, "Hey,
Give him a lecture,
here."
basically, right? Like,
And he wrote, Confucius says, and the Chinese guy slunked off and went back to his unit.
Yeah, it's powerful.
Powerful, incredible story. And it's to me, it's more than just this story. It's a hallmark of what Korean culture at its heart is like. It's this educated, cultured people.
I love that.
Interesting, huh?
Yeah.
I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, and I feel like that fully agrees with, stuff that you've taught in the past, talking about how Korean culture lines up. And so that's cool to kind of see validation of that.
Interesting illustration
of
that. Yeah, it is. Okay, well, we thought we'd just share it with you. I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.